Real quick, let me just remind you that Prison School, the legendary ecchi comedy anime, came out in 2015. As of the recording of this segment, it is Tuesday, June 28th, 2022. That is 7 years. Consider that for a second, really. Think about what you were doing 7 years ago versus now. Medaka Box debuted on April 5th, 2012. 2012, that's 10 years now. 10 whole years. Nichijou, Fate Zero, Mirai Nikki, Bento, Steins Gate, and Madoka Magica. That's 11 years. Panty and Stocking, Angel Beats, Arakawa Under the Bridge, and Rainbow. That's 12 years. Fairy Tail, Bakemonogatari, and Dragon Ball Z Kai. That's 13. Soul Eater and Trash Can. That's 14. Bacano. That's 15. Code Geass, Reborn, Death Note, Black Lagoon, D Gray Man, Gintama, and Ergo Proxy. That's 16. Mushishi. That's 17. Samurai Champloo. That's 18. Full Metal Alchemist. That's 19. Azumanga Daioh. That's 20 now. And Hellsing is at 21. 21 years. 21 whole years. Hellsing is legally able to drink, drive, take Hellsing Ultimate out on a date, and then go to prison for it. The reason I'm taking you through this lengthy intro is to really hammer home just how old some of the defining anime from my generation are now. Merriam-Webster defines retro as relating to, reviving, or being the styles and especially the fashions of the past. Fashionably nostalgic or old-fashioned. So, while many of the aforementioned anime may technically classify as retro at this point, I'm not focusing on those. No. For this video, I'm going even farther back. Huh? What the heck is this supposed to... I used the crappy stock time travel visual and everything. Alright, that's not far back enough. Let me try this again. Oh, come on. That doesn't even make sense. How did I go forward in... Oh, hold on. This is a good one. Hold on. The sword. Man, what the heck is this now? This is way too far. Dang it. Forget it. The joke's gone. It's done. Let me just get to the point. Three things before I go ahead. Number one, I am only covering anime from the years 1970 to 1998. Why start at 1970, you ask? Because do you really expect me to talk about this for an extended period of time? I am not Watch Mojo. It's not happening. Which leads into the second point. Number two, this is not a timeline / history of the medium video. I'm not here to write a freaking dissertation on the history of anime, because not only do a lot of the anime pre-1970 have little to no entertainment value outside of a historic context, but I also, surprise surprise, have not seen every anime ever made. I could sit in this exact room, in this exact spot, for the next decade doing nothing but watching anime, and I still wouldn't be able to watch and review every anime ever made. It's not happening. Which leads to the final point. Number three, I'm not covering every single retro anime in existence, nor am I covering one per year or one per decade. No. The anime I'll be talking about are a select few which I believe are not only superb for their time, but anime that can still be considered exceptional even to this day. And I'll mostly just be proceeding in chronological order, with some exceptions for the longer running franchises. In any case, if you manage to make it through whatever this intro segment has been, then you're probably in it for the long haul at this point. So, grab some snacks, maybe get some donuts, Some Mike and Ike's, that's top quality candy right there. Yeah. Bottles of water, yeah. Blanket, comfy couch too, because this is about to be a long one. 1970s Ashita no Joe, an anime following Joe Yabuki as he goes from nameless wanderer to professional boxer. While it is a sports anime, Ashita no Joe places less emphasis on excessive spectacle and focuses more so on the life of a man who becomes a boxer. The early episodes of the series are entirely devoted to introducing you to Joe, the protagonist of the series, Tange Danpei, a former boxer who takes interest in Joe, seeing him as his hope for tomorrow, Shiraki Yoko, daughter of a rich family and a local philanthropist whom Joe despises, as well as a group of kids from the city who look up to Joe as an older sibling. Joe himself is just this stubborn, uncooperative hothead that's so quick to throw a punch, but even quicker to get punched, fighting anyone that dares to look at him wrong. He so consistently antagonizes everyone and readily gets into fights that while you may be able to get an idea as to what made this wandering teenager end up this way, it still doesn't make it any less annoying to see. He keeps up that same nonsense until it eventually just gets him shipped off to juvie, where he ends up meeting Nishi, who becomes one of his first real friends, along with a certain man that'll end up changing his whole life. Contrary to what one may expect, there are no over-the-top special moves or melodramatic occurrences every few seconds for the sake of it. It's more about taking the time to build up each character and their motives, and then bringing them together in the ring to create a match you get emotionally invested in. The first real match doesn't even take place up until episode 14, with every confrontation before that being Joe one-sidedly pummeling someone or getting pummeled himself. And even in that first match, it's made clear that Joe barely even has the basics down, and even those were only recently taught to him by Danpei. His moves consisting of basic jabs, no real defense, and one signature move, while his opponent Rikishi is much more experienced and focused, leaving Joe completely outclassed. All of this having been conveyed in their prior meetings, but now coming together in an electrifying battle, culminating in an epic final clash that fully sets Joe on the path to be a pro boxer in order to duke it out once more with his rival and friend, Rikishi Toru. Having been directed by Osamu Dezaki, each attack and movement has a unique style to it that really hammers home how hard-hitting some of the punches really are. However, Dezaki's style is also to the anime's detriment, as it can really show its age sometimes, with how the damage a character has sustained can be heavily exaggerated, only for that same exact character to be A-OK 3 seconds later. There's also the incredibly limited facial expressions, with someone like Yoko only having 3 looks: a blank stare, a smirk, or a frown. Even with the limitations of the time though, seeing Joe slowly grow from a hollow and cynical punk to an awkward, still somewhat hostile guy with some good people to support him, it makes it worth it to see his journey through to the end. Then, Joe makes his return in 1980 with a direct continuation of the first series in Ashita no Joe 2. Now making his return after a life-changing event, Joe tries to pull his life together once more with new trials and rivals sprouting up everywhere. There's Kim and his tragic story of how he became so robotic, Jose Mendoza, a family man who starkly contrasts Joe and his whole lone wolf way of life, Leon Smiley and Carlos Rivera, these easygoing yet determined guys who you can immediately feel for, especially with how they interact with Joe. Each character brings not just their own stories and personalities, but manage to bring out the personality of everyone they meet and make each scene, as well as the fights themselves, engaging. However, being a direct continuation of a series that concluded in 1971, the first couple of episodes of Season 2 overlap with the last 25 episodes of the original series. So it's best to finish Season 1 at episode 54 and move ahead to Season 2 from there. While the second season is an all-around better production than Season 1, there are a few drawbacks. One of them being that there are some very noticeable voice acting changes, most notably for Nishi and some of the kids, which make them sound painfully distant from the original in comparison to every other character in the show. Along with there being constant instances of the anime rehashing the same Joe is hard-headed and antagonizes everyone point over and over for some quick melodrama to fill time. But keep in mind I have no interest or care for boxing in any capacity, nor have I ever really been into sports anime, yet somehow I watched both seasons, found enjoyment in them in spite of my initial thoughts, and walked away with that enjoyment, as well as one very emotional moment that I will not spoil that nearly started to put tears in my eyes. So, in spite of the flaws I mentioned, if you're willing to give the anime a shot, what you'll find is an engrossing tale of one man's struggle to make something of his life before resigning himself to his destructive lifestyle and burning it all away in one of anime's most iconic endings of all time. This is a bit of a strange one, because in its 50 plus years of existing, there's never really been one particularly high quality entry to use as a perfect example of everything that the Lupin the Third franchise has done right to survive for so many decades. Though the production staffs and intentions behind each entry may have continued to change with time, the central quintet of characters almost never cease to be entertaining, forever enduring, never failing to make whatever material they appear in enjoyable. Whether it's a pilot film from the 60s, a 50-episode TV series from the 80s, a TV special from 1989, or a movie from 1996. Lupin the Third, the title character, a self-aware, jack-of-all-trades master thief that puts all other action heroes to shame by being energetic and having incredibly animated reactions to everything that's thrown at him. Lupin doesn't just drive the car. When Lupin starts driving, he goes all over the road, the sea, and the walls, gliding on two wheels and drifting like a madman. When he sees a woman, the man starts flipping out like he just can't process what he's seeing. When he's escaping or fighting, he flips, dips, dashes, and flies around like he's some weirdo comic book character. And it's because he is. And he's aware of it, which is why most problems are met with a huge grin, with him only becoming dispirited or wrathful for another's sake. Jigen Daisuke, an ace gunman with a weird chin who's not amused by anything, not fazed by anything, is in it for himself, and is completely untouchable because the man has no eyes under that hat and always hits his mark. Except for when none of that is true, because he does enjoy the upbeat lifestyle. He'll always show up to help, and when he starts getting shot at and can't return fire, you best believe he's making a break for it, clinging onto that hat like his life depends on it. He's as dependable as they come, always keeps his signature firearm on him, does in fact have eyes under that hat, and will always be around to be the voice of reason. Or just to ridicule the others. Fujiko Mine is another jack of all trades, with her love of money always appearing to be her number one motivator. She'll often rival the others, or sometimes just decide to tag along for the adventure. Armed with any weapon she happens to be carrying at the time, her motorcycle, and an actual change of clothes unlike any other member of the main cast, she'll always be there to contribute. Only to then try and pull one over on the gang, taking all the money and booking it, leaving everyone to chase after her with a smug grin on her face and money flying everywhere. Or sometimes she'll just end up being caught one step behind and left with nothing but an annoyed look. She'll always feign being the voice of reason, only to end up being just as much of a clown as the rest of the gang. Goemon Ishikawa, a samurai more kind-hearted, honorable, and respectful than anyone else, only for it to usually be used against him. Someone who's always training, always meditating, looking to improve himself and his sword. Usually just so happening to be in the area in order to assist and to put his training to the test, or just to help those in need. His swordsmanship is so absurd that there is nothing his weapon can't cut while in his hands. Unless there is, in which case Goemon can only stand there completely baffled by his own inability to cut something. He's the most straightforward, disciplined member of the main cast, but most importantly, when it comes to any woman being kind to him, all that composure just goes straight out the window. Inspector Zenigata, the antithesis of Lupin, being a man of the law through and through. In his book, every value should be upheld, every rule followed, and every Lupin the Third arrested. No matter where on Earth Lupin ends up, Zenigata will be trailing close behind, ready with a pair of handcuffs and a prison cell. While he's more than skilled enough to put hundreds of criminals behind bars, Lupin is always his number one priority. Being an exceptionally competent and resourceful officer of the law, there's little to nothing that can stand in his way. Nothing that can phase his unwavering determination to capture Lupin, until he finally pulls it off and readily drags him to prison, only to then realize that he's been duped again, and that hard work, determination, and well-intentioned demeanor morphs into a single, contorted expression and a yell. These 5 characters are the heart of every Lupin the Third entry, and it's because all of them share a lot of traits that they never cease to be enjoyable to watch. The self-awareness, the faith and consideration for one another, even if unspoken, the highly exaggerated expressions and reactions, their respective worldviews, abilities, and interactions are what crafts the ideal entry into the Lupin franchise. And what all of those traits boil down to is a central idea of freedom. The 1984 TV series Lupin the Third Part 3, the 1989 TV special Goodbye Lady Liberty, the 1990 TV special Hemingway Papers, the 1996 film Dead or Alive, the 1979 film Castle of Cagliostro, and even the 1992 TV special From Russia with Love to some extent. Each of the iterations of the Lupin franchise I named carry that central idea of freedom. That's not to say that none of the other entries do, but instead that the ones I named managed to do so for their full runtimes. However, rather than going through every entry of the Lupin franchise pre-1998 to illustrate the different takes on the main cast, I'd like to use the one TV series that capitalizes on the best of Lupin and the gang. In 1984, the third TV anime for the Lupin franchise came about, being titled Lupin the Third, Part 3. The draw this time was that the episodic nature, the exaggerated expressions, the outlandish characters, the humor, and the over-the-top action were fully realized, creating a style of self-awareness. Character design shifted from episode to episode, with the episodes themselves now being equally as varied, with some focusing on the gang being all together, while others served as solo outings, allowing for characters like Jigen, Goemon, and Fujiko to be the focus of the adventure. A talking dolphin, a goofy robot, Goemon facing down a friend from the past, 80s dancing, a battle against a bullet-dodging vengeful assassin, disguise shenanigans, the whole gang being duped into doing a good deed. All of this and more bundled with the best opening-ending combo of them all, along with a fittingly 80s soundtrack by Yuji Ono. It's not just in the ideas themselves, but the way they're brought to life that makes Part 3 stand out. Even with the Zenigata still being made a fool of most of the time, with the art style and behaviors of the other cast members, it feels much more acceptable. The same goes for Fujiko's betrayals, which are often saved till the very end, with the gang either betraying her betrayal or sitting there dumbfounded before grinning and making a break for it too. The extent to which Part 3 understands itself and the Lupin franchise and plays off of that is how it represents the core idea of freedom. The globe-trotting goofiness now has the self-awareness to effectively deliver on the humor, while also being able to create climactic battles and emotional moments. That's how Part 3 illustrated its freedom, because no matter where on Earth the gang was, no matter what the job was or who the side characters were, it always kept to that core idea of freedom that the Lupin franchise was built on. While not every entry into the franchise has been amazingly high quality and made full use of the core theme, if you're willing to take a chance on an entry, what you'll find will be timelessly entertaining characters, soundtracks that never cease to be a jam, and some self-aware action and humor that makes Lupin worth it. Alright, now we're getting to my bread and butter. 80s anime. Specifically, Space Adventure Cobra from 1982. Following the legendary space outlaw, Cobra, and his partner Armoroid Lady as they drift through the galaxy, frequently being confronted by the malicious Pirate Guild. Firstly, you should realize that everything I just said is more in line with what you'd find on the back of a VHS tape for the anime than anything else. While that summary is technically accurate, Space Cobra is really just a series of fun adventures throughout space, tied together with some imaginative character designs, along with a great setting brought to life through jazzy music and characters befitting the adventure of the week style. From neon-lit, futuristic cities with smoke-filled bars where androids and all forms of otherworldly beings are commonplace, to vast desert planets with treasures hidden deep beneath the sand, along with entire civilizations, Space Cobra has a way of making each episode its own gripping journey, never falling into a repetitious groove due to every episode taking place in interesting environments, with the arcs that do revolve around a single planet and the same characters pulling you into the action through some compelling storylines and intriguing characters. Cobra and Lady themselves are perfect choices for the main duo, with the anime never beating you over the head with how virtuous and infallible they are, but also never pushing to make them needlessly vile, allowing for the viewer to decide for themselves what to make of this goofy-faced, all-red-wearing man and his cool, down-to-earth Armoroid partner. In terms of action, Cobra hits the mark like it's nothing. Whether it's through dogfights among the stars, blaster weapons and laser swords, or just good old-fashioned hand-to-hand combat, The action is always well animated, with a lot of impact behind every punch and gunshot, thanks largely in part to Osamu Dazaki's style once again. Especially when it comes to Cobra's signature weapon, the Psycho Gun. When Cobra fires this thing, the colors distort, it lets out this cool sound. Cobra gets blown back by the sheer power of it, and whoever's on the receiving end gets blown away. Even with its incredibly stupid name, the Psycho Gun is really played up to be a powerful weapon and a real threat for all of Cobra's enemies. And that's Space Cobra in essence. Excitement and unhindered fun. There are a few story arcs shared across episodes like the triplets and the mystery of their tattoos, Cobra joining a sports ball team to take down a crime syndicate, or the final arc where Cobra gets ready to take down the Pirate Guild. But the larger story is one about interplanetary expeditions and the experiences left to be had. And if you stick around to the credits, you might even end up hearing a familiar tune. This right here is where it all comes together. One city, one Mokori man, one woman armed to the teeth with an absurd amount of anti-Mokori weaponry, one trustworthy but sometimes a little stingy detective, one man built like a tank who is surprisingly kind, and one City Hunter is an anime revolving around Ryo Saeba and the various clients he helps as the notorious sweeper, City Hunter. The jobs he takes vary from bodyguard to hitman to usually just bodyguarding but with some kind of twist thrown in. The driving force behind the series are the characters and their ever-changing relationships with one another, along with a single setting, that being Tokyo, Japan. In the earliest episodes, Ryo is shown to really be the City Hunter, someone who is only approached when the situation is truly dire and the client needs help that the police can't legally provide. He's no stone cold killer, but there's such a stark contrast between the wacky, carefree Mokori man Ryo Saeba and the I'm gonna make sure you never walk the streets of Japan again City Hunter. That contrast generates the idea that one of those personas is just an act, and it's only when a close friend is killed, leaving Ryo to watch over his sister, Kaori, that one of those personas disappears. Only the happy-go-lucky Mokori man is left, with the City Hunter being almost entirely erased, as it's clear he doesn't want anyone else to end up dead because of his work. Likewise, rival sweeper Hayato Eugene, nicknamed Umibozu, along with police detective Sayako Nogami, change along with Ryo. Umibozu, initially appearing as a macho man played up to be Ryo's rival, becomes a much more three-dimensional character as he finds people to protect and care about. While Sayako starts off being a patronizing associate of Ryo's, only coming by to use him occasionally, before gradually turning out to be a much closer and more reliable friend. With time, more and more characters end up changing for the better due to Ryo and Kaori, as characters like Sayako's sister Reika and Umibozu's partner Miki, along with Umibozu and Sayako themselves, become noticeably more prominent, kind-hearted characters. And eventually even Ryo himself begins to let go of the act, becoming a far more genuine person than before. These character developments are spread across the 4 seasons, the first being from 1987, the second from 1988, the third from 1989, and the fourth in 1991, with each season building upon the last until the final TV series. Being set mainly in a single city, every episode, every season also serves to evoke a sense of familiarity, as every episode builds upon the last, expanding the viewer's knowledge of the location and its residents. Seeing characters go past familiar places has a way of making you reminisce about past episodes and their characters, wondering what they're up to now. The bright city lights and crowded streets, along with bustling stores and restaurants, characters wearing leotards, leg warmers, and headbands like something straight out of an 80s workout video. Even with new characters coming and going practically every episode, they each have a way of sticking with you, causing you to remember their names and goals, hoping that they reappear one more time. The animation in the series is certainly not the best, though it does improve with each season. However, it more than makes up for it in the clothing, grounded character designs, and some absolutely groovy 80s pop music. The clothing giving away pieces of the character's personality and contributing to the authenticity of the 80s Tokyo setting, with the more realistic character designs making the gags involving zany facial expressions much more comical. And the soundtrack. The soundtrack, which is so varied in the emotions it elicits, managing to always match the mood of any situation. It's not just the songs that play during the action either. Every single opening and ending across all 4 seasons are some of the best I've ever come across. Some are definitely better than others, but the sheer amount of charm present in each one always makes me want to watch just one more episode. The characters are top of the line, and so is the music, with Ryo and Kaori's relationship taking center stage as each season expands upon it, crafting something remarkably meaningful in the process, as they help those around them, all while learning more and more about one another and growing closer. (1992's YuYu Hakusho), telling the story of Yusuke Urameshi, a punk kid who gets a second chance at life after unexpectedly sacrificing his own to save this one munchkin who does not know how to listen. Anyway, long story short, the spirit realm needs a spirit detective to handle demons on Earth and stuff, so Yusuke takes the job, with the best character in the show, Kuwabara, joining him, along with former enemies Hiei and Kurama. Here, there's no gimmick or anything to magically make this 112 episode TV series into some life-changing experience. It simply manages to be extremely refined in most every area. The supernatural elements like the demons and spirit powers, the humor, the action, the characterization, each element is so finely polished that it makes you do a double take. Yusuke is not the sharpest knife in the drawer. He's brash and hardly what you'd call heroic, but even when he creates more problems for everyone else, he'll always end up following through. Kazuma Kuwabara, a rowdy kid with a heart of gold, doing everything he can to stay alive and shining through as the best character in the show. It's not even limited to the main cast either. Even the villains and various adversaries throughout the series managed to be well done. Heck, even the announcer for the tournament is an interesting character. Even though the narrative itself can be a bit erratic with the various powers and character motivations, the way the anime transitions into each arc is so seamless that there's never really a part where it loses you. The animation is stellar. Not always, but when some of the battles really get going, the animation just starts getting really funky, like the animators just wanted to start experimenting. The music gets the job done, maintaining the energy of the high-octane brawls, but still being able to slow things down when it needs to. The opening is catchy and never gets old, which is great because you'll be hearing it 112 times. Bottom line, YuYu Hakusho manages to make its battle-heavy story compelling from beginning to end thanks to nearly every element of the anime being expertly refined, making for an anime that effortlessly flows from arc to arc. From its early evil spirit of the week style, to a life or death tournament, to a potentially world-ending threat, all the way to its finale, leaving you wondering how all those episodes blew by so quickly. Even if I were to just show random clips from Golden Boy with no context whatsoever, I still have confidence that it managed to speak for itself. Being a 6-episode original video animation, or OVA, from 1995, Golden Boy comes and goes before you know it. Following Kintaro Oe, a 25-year-old college dropout traveling Japan looking to learn more about life. The one thing that he could never truly learn about just sitting around in a classroom. So, Kintaro hops from place to place, job to job, taking notes, learning more about the world, and even teaching those around him a few things while he's at it. Every episode is a learning experience of its own, giving rise to a really goofy show with a lot of heart, making it the best kind of educational experience.
日本いや世界をも救う男かもしれない。
きっと見つかるぜ。お前さんの居場所がさ。
It is an extreme rarity to come across a piece of fiction which not only manages to captivate me for its full duration, but even years after, keeps me pondering the characters and their philosophies, presenting a momentous subject matter in such an intricate manner that it influences your own mindset. A piece of fiction capable of positively affecting its viewers. The kind of anime that only comes around once in a blue moon. An anime like Trigun. But maybe all of that's just an excessive use of superlatives. Perhaps it's necessary to go back to the start of it all. This time, beginning with what Trigun is in a different way. set on the planet Gunsmoke, hundreds of years after Earth became uninhabitable due to humanity's actions. Gunsmoke is a barren wasteland, and with no governing power to maintain order, mankind has reverted back to a Wild West style of things. Sheriffs being murdered, gangs running rampant, robberies and kidnappings. The visuals only further verify that what was essentially the death of the Earth and the subsequent need to relocate had no positive impact on mankind whatsoever. With those same behaviors, that same greed and selfishness, tearing apart what little socio-economic infrastructure that had been constructed. Shootouts ripping apart already battered buildings, landowners looking to monopolize what little resources remain, and alcohol being the only way to escape from it all. Fortunately, there do exist some remnants of a fully functioning society, and that's where the lens through which the audience will view the story's events reside. Meryl Streep and her close friend Millie Thompson work refreshingly mundane jobs at an insurance company, all before being ordered to go out and monitor a notorious outlaw known for leaving destruction in his wake. The man has a bounty of 60 billion double dollars and is called Vash the Stampede. They're given no description of his appearance to go off of, leaving them to only rely on rumors from citizens in his last known area. They're told stories that bring to mind images of a remorseless, soulless villain who knowingly brings catastrophe and revels in it. Someone whose lifestyle has warranted such an absurdly high bounty. And through a series of mix-ups, they finally encounter him. And what kind of vile, heinous criminal is the 60 billion double dollar man exactly? Well, he's a scatterbrained, nonsensical, donut-loving, bullet-dodging, superhuman pacifist who disapproves of violence and death completely. That's the Vash they were looking for. Someone who seemingly contradicts his own notoriety. The anime plays off of Meryl's unwillingness to accept that he is the real Vash the Stampede for a bit, but it's undeniable that he is the real Vash. Someone who's inhumanly compassionate, inhumanly forgiving, and a superhuman gunman capable of inhuman achievements when he chooses. Trigun never treats the viewer like an unattentive fool though. It's aware that you've likely put two and two together and are aware that he is the Vash the Stampede and that he isn't human. So the question then becomes, why? Why does he behave that way? Why does he wander amongst humanity helping others? Why does he try to live this way when he isn't even human? Why would he perpetrate the acts which led to his bounty? These are the questions which the events of Trigun gives rise to. And eventually the answers to those questions lead to more questions. Not just about the characters and their philosophies, but the viewers as well. And it's because the plot itself functions to service the ongoing character study that is Trigun. So, as Meryl, Millie, and Vash traverse the desert planet, encountering criminals and civilians, what is it that this character study reveals? Well, let's start with Meryl and Millie. Meryl Streep is a hard-working, fairly straightforward person who has been lucky enough to avoid most of the worst of humanity, but still has enough experience to snap back or fend for herself when necessary. She doesn't appear to be above killing if the situation warrants that level of force, but she never goes out of her way to harm someone. Comparably, her partner Millie Thompson is a very optimistic and upbeat person, always looking to see the best in someone. Even in the worst situations, she'll put others before herself, unwilling to believe the worst, always trying to uphold the values instilled in her by her family. These fairly ordinary perspectives make Meryl and Millie the ideal candidates to balance out some of the more extreme point of views. Then there's Vash. Pushes his traits to the extreme. He smiles wider, laughs harder, and is more heavy-handed in his love and peace policy than anyone. He's purposefully larger than life, often making those around him second guess his notoriety. Though he comes off as a bumbling fool, that only puts those who encounter him at ease. All of these behaviors, all of his compassion, veil his true motives, because who would consider that someone like Vash isn't being 100% transparent? But the tears he sheds for others and the philosophy of life that he preaches are legitimate. They are genuine emotions and beliefs. And it's precisely because they're genuine that it makes his reasonings, his continued struggle, that much more tragic. Vash the Stampede isn't human, as alluded to by his superhuman abilities and knowledge of lost technology. He's been wandering Gunsmoke since the day humanity landed. For over 100 years, he's been roaming, trying to help anyone he can while continuing to try and spread love and peace, continuing to try and see the good in people, avoiding having to take a life. For over 100 years, he's clung to the same philosophy, a philosophy which was once instilled in him by a woman who's been dead for decades. Yet he continues to repeat her words, continually regurgitating those same ideals because that's all he knows. He worships her memory like it's gospel to the point of dogmatism. Yet even after spending so many years of life trying to uphold her values, after watching so many friends and foes come and go with the years, what does he have to show for it? A battered and broken body that's barely being held together. Over 100 years of effort, over 100 years of adhering to the same principles, and it's only ravaged him. And it's heartbreaking to even look at him, to know that this is what has brought him. And what's more disgusting is how he smiles and jokes immediately after. It's a sickening smile that puts it all into context. A smile to try and hide away all the pain. A smile to try and be strong for himself, for his idol, and for those around him. Behaviors that keep trying to make the best of things for everyone else, but have only destroyed him and left him isolated in the process. There's a character by the name of Wolfwood who shows up later down the line and who directly parallels Vash. Both are aiming for peace, with both being enslaved to their own philosophies. But where Vash refuses to take a life, always believing that everyone can be saved, Wolfwood is willing to make sacrifices when necessary, to kill one to save 10, to kill 10 to save 100, to kill 100 to save thousands. He doesn't believe everyone can be saved, and so he justifies the sacrifices by saying, there was no other way, or this is just how things are. And so, what each episode of Trigun is a new encounter which expands upon each character's views, with the encounters and the ensuing antagonist being a test to push each character's philosophies and see if they hold true even in the most dire situations. While the tension of a life or death battle is ever present, knowing that one of the characters places more value on the lives and well-being of others makes it far more engaging, as you want to see how Vash handles each situation, how he handles his own values. So, at the end of it all, after so much death and destruction, after so many years of such a dogmatic way of thinking, after having his philosophy tested and pushed to the limit again and again by a similarly obstinate enemy, what does Vash find? What answer do we, the viewer, find? After such an arduous journey, Vash is forced to open his eyes, forced to use his head and come to a conclusion of his own, acknowledging his failures and flaws in his way of thinking. Vash finds himself, accepts all that Rem did for him, but allows her memory to become just that, a memory, and sets off toward tomorrow with his own confidence and the strength and understanding to know he needs to find the words to articulate his beliefs for himself. And that's the answer, that everyone needs to find their own solutions, their own words to voice their perspectives. It's such a beautifully thought-provoking ending, with Vash walking away now with more confidence and understanding than ever before. An open-ended conclusion, leaving it to the viewer to determine what came after. The kind of ending that's a huge rarity. A piece of fiction that's managed to keep me reflecting on its characters, their philosophies, and the series themes for years. The kind of anime that only seems to come around once in a blue moon. An anime that stood the test of time through striking visuals, a killer soundtrack that'll have you rocking out one moment and then rocking back and forth crying another. Introspective previews which give more depth to an already amazingly written cast and outstanding characters. An anime which never fails to enthrall me for its full runtime. An anime like Trigun. Before I close things out, I just wanted to cover 3 topics pertaining to retro anime that I believe are necessary. First order of business, the retro anime I didn't cover. Before getting into some of the more obscure titles though, let me explain the exclusion of the big names. "1998's Cowboy Bebop." This is why I said I'll explain the exclusion of the big names first, because this will require a lengthy, just absolute, I forgot. That's it. Alright, now that I've covered all the big names that I excluded, let me just get to the heart of this segment. Originally, I intended to sit here for a while, dragging on and on, trying to cover tons of lesser known, lower quality, more abhorrent anime, along with some mediocre titles in a laborious attempt at disproving the idea that every single anime that you haven't seen is some kind of life-changing hidden gem. But I'm deciding against that and proceeding with this instead. There will always be people who build up some unknown anime just because it's unknown and swear it's underrated. It's not. Obscurity does not equate to excellence, and that goes for all forms of entertainment, not just anime. Allowing that crummy train of thought to reign over you will only drain the enjoyment out of the anime you watch and turn every new one viewed into a letdown. So, the best route to take is to throw all the internet lies and pompous nonsense in the trash and just focus on watching what looks cool or interesting to you. Ghost Sweeper Mikami, Otoko Juku, Dai's Great Adventure 1991, and the Galaxy Express movie from 1979 were all anime that I picked up purely because I thought they looked or sounded interesting. Anime that I went into with no real expectations other than, that seems kinda cool. To say I didn't mention them because they didn't have value, like the other series I devoted full segments to, would be a disservice. Each of these had their own enjoyable elements, beginning with Ghost Sweeper Mikami. The 1993 TV series of Ghost Sweeper Mikami having a colorful cast of characters that you always wanted to see interact with one another, along with some great episodic comedy revolving around whatever bizarro job they had to take on. Mikami herself is a great protagonist, being such a stingy exorcist that it makes every job comical. But I did want to see a few more serious episodes that expanded upon relationships a bit. Thankfully, I got my wish with the 1994 Ghost Sweeper Mikami movie. Right out the gate, you're hit with beautiful animation, a darker setting making the vibrant character design stand out that much more, all tied together with the groovy opening theme from the TV series, and having the film focus on a single threat with all the sweepers competing to take on the villain allowed for some more personal interactions with, which is exactly what I wanted. Crafting a heartfelt send-off for the characters, goofing around just like any other jolly day.
じゃあね、みんな。
The 1988 TV series of Otoko Juku, a parody of all the muscular men, over-the-top battle manga of the 80s, taking the characters and putting them in difficult situations and then having them solve their problems in meaningful ways while learning how to be better people. The anime comes in with this roaring opening like the students are performing the school anthem with everyone proudly standing together, while the ending theme is much softer and reflective, with Momotaro pondering the day's events and what he can stand to learn from them. Up until the anime just stops playing to its strengths and becomes exactly the same as the series which it was parodying, ending up being worse off with some half-baked battle nonsense that makes it clear just how integral the simpler life lesson style was to Otoko Juku. The 1991 anime Dragon Quest Dai's Great Adventure is very true to its name in that it's a straightforward, lighthearted, good versus evil journey following Dai as he assembles his party and becomes the hero. What's impressive is that, in spite of its simplicity, it still manages to make exploring the world, seeing all the weird monsters, and then traveling to defeat the final boss fun. The anime never aims for twists. It just sticks to being a predictable story of heroics, and it's surprisingly charming for it. The art style and soundtrack make the world believable, giving off a feeling that you're really going on a grand adventure, with heroes, magic spells, special armor, and new friends around every corner. The 1979 film version of Galaxy Express is a true coming-of-age story, being a voyage across the galaxy where Tetsuro is constantly forced to question his quest, to discard his humanity for vengeance. Meeting other passengers on the Galaxy Express and citizens of various planets they visit, Tetsuro sees where those with similar ambitions ended up. He learns more about the galaxy and its inhabitants, understanding himself and his goals more and more with each encounter. The animation really shows the beauty that's present throughout the galaxy, while also being quick to illustrate just how unforgiving some of the environments can be. The music is amazing and conveys a feeling of wonder through symphonic tracks, crafting an experience that makes for a compelling journey through the stars. Just like I said at the start of the video, I'm not trying to delude you into thinking every single anime pre-1999 is a hidden gem that's superior to everything, because that's not even close to the truth. I only mention these series now because they were anime I just stumbled into and wound up enjoying. Anime that can serve as proof that there is reason to seek out retro anime, because they can be worthwhile, delivering on niche ideas in engaging ways, crafting engaging experiences that I recognize the value in but aren't that deep into, or titles that I found to be really entertaining. but just don't have the time to bring up. So, what about actually watching these anime? Fortunately, by the time I started recording this segment, City Hunter, YuYu Hakusho, Golden Boy, and Lupin the Third parts 1, 2, and 3 have all become available on modern streaming services, while anime like Space Cobra and Ghost Sweeper Mikami have had their full TV series uploaded to YouTube by TMS and Toei Animation respectively. When we're talking about the lesser known anime though, it's no surprise that you'll have to start sailing the 7 seas to watch them. Unfortunately, unless we're talking about the incredibly popular titles, a lot of retro anime just don't come up on newer streaming services. Let's say you're interested in Ashita no Joe and want to check it out. Well, you can search on all the major and minor streaming services, but it certainly isn't there. Well, what about the Slayers films and OVAs? The ones with Naga? Nope, not there. Well, what about Otoko Juku? Nope. Alright, well, what about the Lupin films and specials? Nope, nah. Well, what about no? Well then, what else could you do in that situation but set sail? It's not like there was some opportunity to purchase a product that had its day and proceeded to come and go before you even existed. So what's the alternative to viewing an anime that's no longer in circulation, no longer making money for the original teams? An anime that could be considered obsolete, unfinished, inaccessible, or an outdated representation of its original ideas. Well, that leads into the second order of business. Remakes, reimaginings, and continuations. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on your standpoint, practically every anime pre-1999 is so old that most modern anime viewers aren't going to be giving them the time of day. So, the best way of making that old anime profitable and accessible is by modernizing it. Starting with the first way of bringing an old anime back, remakes. Remakes to me are when it's still the same story, there's still the same characters, setting, and plot lines, but now it's a new animation studio, new music, and a new art style / animation style because it's a new team. Generally speaking, I'm not on board with the idea of just remaking something. Trying to hit the reset button on a piece of media that contained animation, music, and techniques unique to the people that worked on it in that specific time period, just trying to redo what was once done years ago exactly as it was but not really, just doesn't sit well with me usually. However, consider what actually qualifies as a remake for a moment. Imagine you've never seen Hunter x Hunter, you've never seen JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, you've never seen Grappler Baki, and you know absolutely nothing about Dragon Ball Z. If I were to then ask the question, do you think a remake of these anime would be successful? What would your answer be? Well, my answer is obvious. There is no way any of these nonsensical, dusty, antiquated, crummy pieces of rubbish would ever find success among a modern audience. It's not happening. Now, clearly this is me doing a very poor job at exaggerating to try and imitate what my reaction to these shows would be if I wasn't already acquainted with their respective franchises. All in an attempt to convey what it's like to hear about a remake being announced for an anime you have no connection to. The difference being that with all of these shows, the remakes were massively successful, with them completely overshadowing the originals. Hunter x Hunter 2011, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure 2012, and all of its sequels, Baki 2018, and Dragon Ball Z Kai in 2009. Each of these anime succeeded not just on the front of being remakes, but also just being genuinely entertaining anime that managed to catch the attention of a broader audience. The one outlier here is Dragon Ball Z Kai, as by the time Kai came around, the original DBZ had already picked up a sizable following in the West. To me personally though, I have no connection to the original DBZ. I don't. I grew up watching Z Kai on 4Kids and Nicktoons. Some of the films like BoJack Unbound and Broly and all that were rebroadcasted alongside Z Kai, but I don't really have a connection to the original. The only reason I have memories of DBZ, the only reason I have the perception of Dragon Ball that I do, the reason that this is one of the only times you'll catch me speaking highly of Dragon Ball at all, is because of Dragon Ball Z Kai. And maybe that's the intention. Just making an effort to bring the anime to a newer audience who's unaffiliated with the original, even if it comes at the cost of your established audience sometimes. Now, I had planned to go on for a lot longer listing off various remakes, reimaginings, and continuations / spin-offs, along with my thoughts on them, but I think this about summarizes it all. Your mileage may vary depending on how close you are with the original. The reason you may have noticed more uncertainty present in this segment and the previous one is because there is a lot of uncertainty. There's no surefire way to know what will find success, what will fail, what will manage to capture the hearts and minds of a modern audience, what will fade into obscurity, what deserves to be brought back and what doesn't. You can't know. So, instead of harping on and on about success and failure, instead of pretending to be a businessman who only sees these series in terms of potential profits, instead of taking the perspective of the cynical fan who views everything as an insult to the original, I think I'd prefer to just take a middle ground in all of this, with a tad bit of optimism sprinkled in to tackle this one last segment. Influences and importance. In the decades since the 70s, 80s, and 90s, animation studios have been founded and dissolved. Trends in the industry have come and gone, entire careers have begun and ended, and from all of that, new faces that once admired the old have risen to make names for themselves. And because of that, the lifeblood of a lot of retro anime flows through modern anime as well. Speed Racer in the 60s with its wacky, over-the-top races, and the Mach 5 being the coolest car ever made. That lives on in Redline, with its ludicrous animation and spectacle being an intergalactic race. All of those mecha anime from the 70s, with their just awesome mecha designs, they're survived by Gurren Lagann, taking everything from the past, putting it on its back, and drilling its way to the top to carve a name for itself. Cobra and its action-packed space adventure, that's survived by Space Dandy and all of their bizarro adventures. City Hunter and its ever-growing character relationships and episodic stories that still pack an emotional punch, that lives on in Gintama. Lena and Naga annoying each other to death and making their way through a fantasy world, man, you can't tell me that's not survived by Konosuba. Even within that pre-1999 time frame, the influences and effect on one another is clear. Lupin, Cobra, Ryo, Vash, you can see the similarities not only in their appearances, but their behaviors, beliefs, and friends as well. Cobra having an arm that doubles as a weapon, Guts having a cannon arm, and Vash having a cannon arm, Lupin, Cobra, Ryo, Guts, and Vash's influence can also be seen in a certain straw hat wearing man on his journey of a lifetime. This isn't to say that any of the new anime influenced by the older are replacements, but rather that it's a cool way of humanizing the staff behind all of these anime. Crafting an image of characters accepting that their day in the sun is over, and entrusting the core of their series, all of the best their anime had to offer, with a newer generation. Seeing them off as they make names for themselves, ensuring that even if the older titles aren't remembered, everything they were will still live on through the new, with newer viewers being able to experience what those series had to offer, even if they don't come into direct contact with them. And that's awe-inspiring, with how something like Ashita no Joe, or any of the numerous anime I neglected to mention, have had such an impact on their respective genres, to the point where their iconic elements are considered essential aspects or a guaranteed reference for any entry into that genre, with some anime having such a large impact that their influences reached into other mediums entirely. And that marks a huge thing to always keep in mind. The enjoyment to be had from any anime you stumble into. Daikon opening animations is a great example of this, with how the good intentions and unbridled excitement at creating something new with all the things you like are clear as day. Just wanting to make something cool and heartfelt that reaches others. The reason I come down so hard on the mentalities of every old anime is bad or every new anime is bad and every obscure anime is superior is because accepting that line of thought necessitates that you disregard everything that the anime you're viewing is, all in order to just justify your own agenda. It's not about how many anime you've completed on some pointless list. It's not about how much merch you own. It's not about worrying who's an elitist or a conformist. It's not about me sitting here name dropping every pre-1998 anime I've ever seen, because God knows I'll never get to bring them up otherwise. It's not about me praising obscure titles to feign a superior taste. It's not about any of that. It's about making expressive creations which represent the creator's ideas, no matter how whimsical, because it's fun. It's about finding which of those creations speak to you and developing a genuine appreciation for them. Yeah, things are always changing. New problems will never stop sprouting up, and things can seem pretty crappy like most of the time, I'm gonna be honest. But clinging onto that thin ray of optimism and working to make the best of things your way is how you stay sane, how you stay alive and humane. You can't allow that ray of sunshine to be stripped from you on account of someone else. So take those steps forward towards better understanding, an understanding that allows you to confidently cherish that ray regardless of what it may be. So, as I've found myself asking quite frequently as of late, what was the point? Why go to such lengths? Why cover so many titles in an attempt to rouse interest and generate understanding that, yes, while retro anime can be rough around the edges with its animation at times, there are still stories, characters, music, art styles, and fun to experience that can appeal to seemingly niche genres. Well, when it all comes down to it, at the end of the day, I just want to be like a retro anime and say some cool introspective line, knowing that I put forth my best effort and hoping that it means something to someone somewhere. All while the sun sets behind me as I walk off into the distance with a smooth, sentimental tune seeping in.
All the pain I used to know as a hungry child, all alone in this wide world, a heavy load to bear. Searching, I was always searching, looking into every face I saw.
All right, what's with this downer of a song? I can't end with this. Let me see. Let me just pull out the classic.
I feel some touch of love changing me, the man I've been just looking for is you. All my dreams come true now. 背中走るバイブレーション感じて Just fall in love with you. あなたつみれ両手のリングの数よりたくさん恋してきただけど今は命をかけたくなるほどに Love you 欲しいものはあなた一人 Secret desire I feel some touch of love changing me, the man I've been just looking for is you. All my dreams come true now. 出会いらしらバイブレーションしびれて Just nothing can do but you. あなたつみねバラ色愛だけ信じる無邪気なベイベーじゃないわだけど今はひたすら深いどこまでも Won't you 欲しいものはあなた一人 Secret desire
この世はこの世はこの世はこの世はラブ&ピースだ。